So, good afternoon. I'm Julia Coakley, Head of Operations, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, which is being hosted by the Innovation Group. Before I introduce our panel, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and camera is off. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen, which will be answered by our panel during and within our Q&A session. This presentation is accredited for CPD points if this is relevant to your ongoing professional development, and the video will be available on our website and MGAA YouTube channel post-event. Please take time to respond to our feedback survey because this does allow us to put on the best quality events for our MGAA membership. So today's webinar is brought to you by Innovation Group. I'd like to introduce from Innovation Group, Gary de Groot, Business Development Director, Richard Rollit, Technical Director, Craig O'Driscoll, Director of UK Property Services, and from DACBeachcroft, Sarah Dodd, Solicitor, Partner and Head of Subsidence. Gary is Business Development Director at Innovation Group, having joined the business in January 2019. He has worked his whole career in claims, having performed a number of roles across claims handling, account management and sales. So Gary, if I might hand over to you.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks for that rather regal introduction as well. Appreciated. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Julia says, Gary de Groot, Business Development Director at the Innovation Group. I'll just give you a quick 1-minute whistle-stop tour of our business. If anyone needs any more information on Innovation Group, please do get in touch, email or LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to follow up on that. So Innovation Group are a fantastic provider of claims management services globally, operating from North America, Australia, South Africa, Spain, Germany, and the good old UK. Our UK insurance business is split between two divisions. Our motor division, where we handle end-to-end claims on behalf of some of the UK's biggest MGAs and insurers, dealing with everything from FDUL, bent metal and accident management through our repair network, all the way through to credit hire and personal injury defence. And our property division as well, where we've got a vast team of desktop claims partners and engineers dealing with a variety of different perils, including subsidence, as we are here to talk about today. Subs is an area of speciality for us. We've been handling subsidence claims in the UK for over 20 years, pioneering some of the modern handling techniques that you'll see out in the market today. And we're really, excited to be able to talk to the panel and you guys today about where the subsidence market is and some of the challenges that are out there for you as MGAs, insurers, and for us as claims handlers, and what we're likely to see over the next couple of years. So getting ready to get stuck in, we'll just do some quick whistle-stop introductions of our star guest panel today, and no better place to start, I don't think, than the man they call Mr. Subsidence, Mr. Richard Rollit.
Please. Don't do that. Richard, I'm Technical Director at Innovation. Don't listen to Gary. My interest is really around how we use technology to kind of innovate subsidence, reduce claim durations, improve customer journey, that type of thing. And hopefully we'll bring out some more of that as we go through the questions today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richard. And I'll hand over to Craig O'Driscoll.
So Craig O'Driscoll, Director of Operations for Property Services. Started with a building and plumbing background many moons ago, kind of fell into insurance in the 2007 floods, and I've never managed to get out since. So fast forward to today, as I say, looking after operations in property services that covers subsidence and general perils.
Thanks, Craig. And finally, Sarah Dodd.
Hey everybody, my name's Sarah. I'm a partner at DACBeachcroft and head up our subsidence team here, and I also currently sit as the chairperson of the Industry Subsidence Forum.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. So as Julia said, if there's any questions, please pop them in the comments as we go along, or message me directly, and we'll try to deal with those either during the session or at the end. So first question for you, for the panel of experts, I guess. Subsidence, where are we at right now? What are some of the key challenges that are within the market? What's happening out there? What are we seeing as claims handlers? What are our panel of MGA members likely to be dealing with? Richard, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time. There are huge challenges, huge opportunities. So clearly, we've recently had a surge in claim numbers, and subsidence suddenly becomes on everybody's agenda, which is really good. There's a focus around subsidence and how we deal with claims. There are some issues around kind of aging workforce and challenges from that. I think there's some huge technology opportunities coming up from how we kind of embrace technology, particularly around subsidence, which kind of lends itself to that approach. Big challenges around environment, about how we meet net zero, which we'll talk about later on. But I just think it's a really interesting time to be involved in subsidence. And as with all perils, you've got to try and balance that drive to reduce cost, but at the same time give excellent customer service. And it's that challenge that we try to address, and hopefully we'll talk through more as we go through the session.
You touched on technology there specifically as well, and is this an area of claims handling that from a tech perspective has fallen behind what you might see in general perils or other specialty lines, or are we where we need to be in terms of some of the tech being developed out there from an investigation and claims handling perspective?
Subsidence is different to other perils because you can readily model subsidence, and you can do that down to individual postcodes. You can look at risk on a postcode, or even go down further into an individual property basis. So you can look at risk really easily, and it's different to any other peril in that regard. And because you can model it, it lends itself to remote assessments. So COVID helps you to do the remote assessments. It lends itself to AI applications. So when you look at the medical world and you see that doctors are being outperformed by AI machines in terms of their diagnosis, you kind of look at our world and you think, well, we're very reliant on individual skill sets. And if you could move towards embracing some more of that technology and using that technology within the business, you'd be less reliant on individuals. You'd be able to do more within that business framework. And the whole model would change and shift. And I think it would shift for the better. But it's a really interesting time to be involved in subsidence.
Yeah, I think the same as any claims handling element, you're looking to get the balance right between where you implement technology and AI and where you retain good quality handling as well. They still have to complement each other, don't they?
Yeah, and that's why I thought it was useful to get Craig on the call, because I quite happily have a completely technology-based, no humans involved at all, and it's good to have somebody that balances that, to say, hang on a minute, we do need people in this process, absolutely.
I can't believe you've said it again.
So Craig, I mean, as an ops director, what are you seeing out there? What are the challenges that you're facing right now, and specifically on the stuff that Richard's touched on? How do we get the right balance between technology and AI and quality of workforce? And I know you've got some thoughts around the challenges of the quality of people that are out there right now too.
So I think technology's got a massive part to play, and there's lots of development to be had in that area, but you can't sniff at our people. These are what delivered for our customers for a long time. But one of the things that's on my mind and is worrying, we across the industry, there's an aging workforce, and it's worrying about the loss of expertise that will go with that. There's lots of people who we're talking to who are ready for retirement or putting plans in place. So we found that a challenge, and me and Richard have worked really closely together. I panned his AI piece, but obviously that is going to add lots of benefits. But it's about getting that balance. You're right, Gary. So what we've heavily invested in time more than anything is our people. We're coming to Elevate soon, which we're going to release into the markets. There'll be more information coming around for that. But what we found is we had some really good success with our talent pipeline, you know, getting people in who didn't really have the right technical expertise, but definitely the right behaviours and the aptitude to learn. And we've got the right people to teach them through qualified learning and on the job as well. So there've been some good successes in that. And what we've done is really learn those lessons and put it into a programme going forward. Now this spreads across our internal talent pipeline. As I said, we're working closely with a number of universities on a graduate scheme, but we took the opportunity to look at our whole training and development piece with Richard as well. So we're really excited about that. Now, there's still going to be some challenges. You know, I've heard people in our business refer to fully qualified engineers with the right behaviours as unicorns out in the market, and there seems to be a bit of a scrap out in the market trying to get those right people in. So I don't really want to be involved in that dogfight. I really want to be in a place where we can future-proof our business and be able to service our customers in the right way and actually use the expertise. So some of those guys that are approaching that kind of age are absolutely instrumental in what we're trying to build for the future.
And I think, Craig, there needs to be a synergy between the way that the product is moving and the workforce that you've got aligned to that. You know, you've spoken about this and spot on that you know, the engineers that are out there for subs is an aging workforce who are used to doing things a specific way. As this modernises, and Richard has sort of touched on the use of technology already, we want a workforce out there that's aligned to the way that that's going to be moving forward as well. So it's a really good point, and hopefully we can start to get a new generation of subs engineers through over the next 5 years that can go on to bigger and better things.
Now, guys, sorry, Gary, just on that, and our guys have really embraced that. They've really embraced the technology, and it's really important to me, as it is innovation group, that the people who do the work help design the work as well. And I know that sounds like a bit of a cliche, but we really do believe in that, and they really help shape how we're going to be delivering in the future.
Cool. Thank you. Sarah, from your side, what are you seeing? What are the key themes out there from some of the clients that you're talking to and some of the challenges that you're facing from a litigation perspective as well?
I think I'd probably echo everything that Richard said. I think he gave quite a useful précis of the challenges at the moment. But I think what I would observe is since lockdown number one, so last spring, and I would say for the past sort of 16, 18 months, I'm seeing what I would almost feel like is an exponential increase in conversations around climate change and how that's impacting subsidence claims. So I have no magic answer there, but I would definitely echo what Craig and Richard say, which is that due to the amount of change at the moment, the only things that can happen are innovation. You know, the market will respond to that change and that demand, and there will be a lot of innovation to meet those changes. Also, in respect to the ageing workforce point, which I totally appreciate, and I feel it too. For example, in litigation, we use expert engineers. Perhaps that's a small field of people, perhaps some people disappearing from that field due to retirement. But one of the things which we're really focused on in my role as the chair of the Subsidence Forum is really encouraging apprentices into the world of insurance, and particularly into the world of subsidence. It's something that perhaps isn't advertised very well, but that's one of our key things, is to get the youngsters in, get them infused, get them taking part. So there really is that line of talents coming up through the ranks.
Okay, that's interesting. And I just want to have a home on this technology piece. So Richard, I'll probably come to you on this. We talk about new pieces of tech that are supporting. What are the key ones that you're seeing out there that are supplementing the claims handling process in particular?
We're really looking at how we use technology in terms of fairly simple AI to take away a lot of some of the routine stuff that happens behind the scenes. So how we process claims. So it's less about using technology to make diagnosis decisions, although I think that will come. It's more about streamlining that process so that people can add value where they actually count. So where they're in discussions with customers rather than in the background trying to process stuff from one system to maybe an insurer system. It's trying to make that process more streamlined. And there's lots of technology out there now that means that you can adapt your system so that they do work more effectively, so that those whole processes are much more joined up. There's much less manual working within that. But all of that requires investment and input into that. And it also links into sort of Craig's world of how you implement that technology and how you get that technology in place, and how you maintain that kind of interest from claims partners and from engineers, how you keep their interest in that job and how you make that job a great job for them and something that they enjoy doing and they find rewarding. But I think those technologies tend to support that. But it's just making sure it's positioned in that right way so that people don't think, as Craig alluded to, that my desire is to sack everybody and go to a completely automated system. It very much isn't, but I can see how that might come across.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're going to move on from that now, and I want to talk specifically around defective design. Sarah, I'll come to you first on this. What's your current thinking around the FOS guidance on defective design and how this might play out over the next couple of years?
Well, this is a hot topic, obviously a hot topic, which is why we're discussing it, and it's a bit of a tricky one. And Richard, do feel free to jump in and correct me if anything I say you know for a fact is incorrect. But I decided one day to do a bit of a trawl of the FOS website and have a read through past decisions on defective design that have happened since the 2018 surge, and it was a real mixed bag in there. So I have to admit, I came out of that sort of trawl of the previous decisions with feeling no clearer really as to what the general trend is. One tends to swing one way, one swings the other. What I can certainly understand is we need to be moving away as an industry from dealing with subsidence cases which arise from I don't know whether it's a porch or a conservatory or some inappropriately constructed structure from becoming part of a claim. But I know that's a bit of a political hot potato and it's very difficult to give a sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. I'm not aware of the fact that the FOS have given any specific guidance on it, but I'd be interested, Richard, if you know any different.
Yeah, no, it very much as you say, it's very much in a state of flux. We have had a couple of conversations with the FOS trying to understand their approach. And they seem to be looking at subsidence in the same way as other perils. So they're trying to make that judgment of whether the customer was reasonably aware of the defect, because they think it would be unfair if a customer wasn't reasonably aware that you would exclude that damage. So a bit like those examples where a policy might exclude rot as a general exclusion, but if you didn't know that the dishwasher was leaking and that caused dry rot, then often the ombudsman would say it's not fair to rely on that exclusion. And I think they're trying to apply the same kind of consistent approach across subsidence so that you don't, and I think it will help once they kind of get to that position that you don't have those kind of positions where a customer feels, I've done nothing wrong, how would I possibly have known, how could I have possibly foreseen that this would have happened. And I guess for the purist insurer it's probably wrong, but I think in the minds of most customers it's probably the right way to handle it. I just wish that things would happen more quickly with the FOS in terms of giving us a better steer on what their kind of approach will be, and giving us a better kind of guidance as to how we should approach these, what questions we should ask, how we should be looking to apply that defective design exclusion, because it is a big change from where they were previously, where you could pretty much exclude almost all conservatories and porches and that type of thing. So now they're swinging much more towards you have to take a more kind of conservative view and look at the customer and how they've had that thing built.
I think there is perhaps some more changes. If aren't there some changes to the permitted development brackets in planning law? So I think more and more stuff is becoming part of the permitted development, so won't require any input from the local authority, perhaps, which might have a knock-on effect as well.
Yeah. So the FOS seem to be clear that if you've got building regulation approval, regardless of whether that was a good decision or not, they don't think it's fair to exclude those claims. But the more, as you say, that you have these kind of permitted developments where you're not necessarily getting building regulation involvement or that type of involvement, then it does kind of cloud the issue, and it will become more difficult. And it would be useful to kind of bring in Craig, because I mean, operationally, it is clearly problematic to have these.
Headache, Richard.
Yeah.
So it is an absolute headache, and from an operational point of view, that clarity leads to uncertainty, and that uncertainty leads into different interpretations. You know, we work for a number of clients who have to work with that lack of clarity, and they interpret in different ways. So challenging from an operational point of view is applying different degrees in different areas, and you know, we're dealing with people here. We're not in the AI world yet. So you know, to jump in between the two, or like I say, just that lack of clarity leads to uncertainty, which brings its challenges.
Right, I know that there's a split between the way insurers and MGAs are interpreting this, but is there a leaning more one way than the other? So Richard's point around foreseeability, is that where the majority of MGAs and insurers are placing their hat in terms of what they think this will look like going forward?
I think some have had a real practical approach to it. You know, some have erred on the side of caution. Some have gone from 1 to 10, and that's what I'm saying causes the headache for us operationally, because we deal with a number of clients. So ultimately, we're going to interpret their policies how they want them interpreted. So that's for us, and I suppose what we're trying to do is work with our clients to help them understand where they want to be and how they want those applied.
Okay, and Richard, you know, and perhaps for you and Sarah, so for the members on the call today for MGAs, they need to be thinking about how they reserve around this going forward, and whether they change their reserving methodology in light of what might happen over the coming year, and where the FOS might land on this.
Yeah, so at its peak, we were probably declining about 5% of all of the claims under that defective design exclusion, and that's changed. I mean, I would be surprised if it's even 1% of claims currently. So that there has been a shift, and that will have an impact on costs, because they're decline claims that you're now accepting, and often they've got poor foundations, and you will end up doing work to the foundations simply because you can't exclude that once you've accepted the claim. So it will have a cost impact, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah. Sarah, same for you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I don't think I've got any more to add there. I would just flag up something that's talked about perhaps in the legal world, which is having stood the test of time. So there's talk about, well, you know, the foundations may have been defective, but it's been fine for 10 years and it's only just now suffered damage. And looking more into that test of time argument, I think that again, that's in flux. That doesn't really have too many legs either. I don't think it's necessarily relevant whether something stood there fine for however many years, but just thought I'd throw that into the mix as well, just to confuse things even more.
And that is something that the FOS are increasingly looking at. So it is a useful point. I mean, like you, I struggle with it. So the policyholder that is diligent and reports a claim as soon as they notice it might get penalised, compared to somebody who waits until, it's 10 years old and look, it stood the test of time, and makes a claim then. It's a difficult measure to apply, but they are looking at it from that kind of customer perspective of what would a reasonable policyholder think about, it stood up, so yes, it's defective, but it's been there for a while, and they're increasingly thinking it's unfair to exclude those claims. But it does become enormously problematic in terms of how you apply that and how you give guidance to a field team to put that through consistently, because that's the issue that all of this raises, is that you can't give a consistent view or a consistent approach if the rules are really quite vague, and each case on its own merits does make it very hard to be treating customers fairly in each instance.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys. I'm going to move along now. I want to talk a little bit about volume. So we, as I'm sure everyone does, has a get-together around April to decide whether we're likely to have a surge this year. Is it another Indian summer, as the newspapers are reporting what's happening? And actually, there has been some changes around volume profile over the last few years. I guess the question from me, and I'm sure it's one that our members will share here as well, what does the new norm look like? New norm is the term that gets thrown around very easily these days. What does it look like in terms of volume? Is increased volume now to be expected almost every year? Is that what we should be seeing going forward? Richard, again, we'll come to you first.
It's a difficult one. Subsidence has always been a really spiky peril. There is no kind of consistency to it. What seemed to happen was that every time we had a surge, beginning in 76 and then subsequently in the 80s and 90s, was that the base level of claims would rise. So every time you had a surge, then the following years claim numbers would be higher, and that seemed to carry on that process, very spiky process, until the last surge in 2006. And at that time you were seeing about 30,000 claims a year as a kind of background level, and then following that claim numbers dropped off until 2017, when there were only about 12,000 claims. And then we had the surge in 2018, and they picked up since then. So we're currently around 25,000 claims a year, somewhere around there. I mean, in my head, climate change, and Sarah will doubtless know more about it than I do, but climate change is suggesting that drought years become more frequent. When we get a drought year, we get a surge. So if past performance and things go by, then yes, we will see a kind of increase in surge years, and we'll see an increase in claims volume. But I think with all of these things, it's very difficult to make those kind of predictions. I think the only thing we can guarantee is that it's going to be very, very variable, and it will be a challenge, because it will go up and down, and it will be very difficult to predict, particularly as you say, you can only forecast the weather 5 days with any kind of accuracy, and 3 months if you're stretching things. So looking ahead over 10 or 20 years is extremely difficult.
That's what you say every year, Richard, when we come to you. Is there going to be a surge, isn't there? Yeah. That's why we call Michael Fish. Well, it could be, it might not be.
Yes, the odds are equally balanced. Hotter, colder, wetter, drier. Yeah.
That's it.
So Sarah, thoughts from your perspective, and particularly, I know it's a really difficult subject to comment on, but the global warming effects of this as well. I'm not sure of the science behind how that's affecting it so far, but what are you seeing, and what are your expectations around volume moving forward?
I think we had a big year in 2018, and Richard was right in that, a surge year is followed by another inflated claims year. So 2019 was busy, and then 2020 the pandemic hit, and everybody decided they wanted to go and live near the beach or in the countryside. And there was a boom in the housing market, which then I think, as well as a nice warm spring and summer, then caused a lot of subsidence claims, because lots of pre-purchase surveys and people sitting at home. I'm at home and looking at my four walls going nuts if you see a crack, and so I think it's difficult at the moment to necessarily learn any lessons from that. But in terms of looking into the future, I mean, quite a bit of stuff's hit the press in the last couple of months about subsidence claims looking like they'll be on the increase, in the decades to come. And The climate crisis is a crisis. We're in the midst of it. Temperatures are going up. We can see it in the likes of Canada and whatnot, and fires recently in Cyprus. That we are living through this. This is what we are experiencing. So as part of that, whilst I'm not a scientist, I have to say that if we are going to get hotter, drier summers, then that has to have a knock-on effect and cause more subsidence claims.
Yeah, and something MGAs need to be accounting for then, presumably, Sarah, as well.
Yeah, it's the speed at which, I suppose it's the speed at which that's going to happen. Probably already is happening. It's probably a point for debate, but I would say we're probably at the start of that already, and we'll see this getting worse and worse, and probably quicker than we think. In my mind, we're in 2021 now. There's quite a bit on the agenda politically and in terms of targets, which will get us to 2030. So I feel like the next 8.5 years are going to be really interesting, certainly exciting. And I guess we'll just have to live through it and see what the numbers look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, operationally, volume's still pretty high for us at the moment on the back of, as Sarah said, a lot of people moving house as well, which has impacted it. What's your view on what's going to happen over the next few years with volume?
So just before we go to the next few years, Sarah just mentioned the word exciting then. I'm not sure I'd call it that after the last sort of 6 months. But it's definitely brought its challenges and successes. As you were saying, everybody's at home. Market for housing went through the roof, and I think there's bits of everything. There's climate changes, and I think it's going to be really difficult for us to understand what the new norm is. So what I'm talking to my guys about is being agile. The last 6 months, sort of certainly January onward, would be when you really concentrate on your training, your development, your research, and that has absolutely been impacting from our normalized plans point of view, because we've had more claims through. So as I say, that is absolutely from our point of view a success, but difficult to resource and difficult to plan for the future. So some of the technology that we've been working with has been a massive help, but I think it's got to be a watch this space, because we've had to react. We've done it with some fantastic support from the clients that we work with, and quite understanding and listening to our advice from the future. But I think we've had just a few years on the trot where it's been something different every year, as we were talking about, from the surge and knock on to last year, the challenges we had with the effects of COVID and having to exact remote working. If you remember, it weren't too long ago that everybody was sat there trying to plan and get everybody through working at home, and again, there's been some massive successes for that, and some benefits for us operationally, which has helped with our efficiencies as well. So I think we can't look at it in isolation or just point at one thing. We've got to really pull this together, but exciting for the future, I think, as Sarah said.
I think, I always despise ambiguity on these answers, because you feel like you're covering your back a little bit. But with COVID in particular, it makes assessing what's happened over the last 18 months almost impossible. It's not a situation that you can model historically at all, or hopefully that you'll ever have to go through again. So you can only guess as the impacts that's had on claim numbers, in the same way that we deal with this from a motor perspective, and how that's significantly seen a decrease in claim numbers because no one's been on the road for a year. It's very difficult to take anything from that last 18-month period and say that's what we're going to expect going forward, I think.
I think just on that as well, though, just because of that uncertainty and an unknown situation, it really gets the cogs working, like from the front line right up to our senior leadership team, on how we can do things different. And we were in a situation where we had no choice, as everybody did. You had to do something different. And I drove everybody mad with the phrase of opportunity out of adversity, and we really did use that opportunity to invoke some working practices that ultimately were a success and help with that resource and where we place that.
I agree. Because I've been reading recently about climate change starting in the Industrial Revolution, etc. And I realised I've read that we're in the innovation revolution at the moment, and that's exactly what COVID's forced us to do. It's absolutely forced us to innovate, and it's those innovations and that sort of way of thinking, and that sort of, I don't know how to solve this, but I can have a think of some opportunities and options that's going to actually move us forward.
Yeah, well, I think necessity, the mother of creation, as they say, right? And, we've all come from businesses historically where setting someone up home working would take 2 months, and then all of a sudden we were able to do it for an entire workforce within 5 days. So I think you can see that when there is a need for something, that there's innovation that's created out the back of that. It's now, I guess, the challenge for everyone across all industries is deciding which part of those services to take into your normal product set going forward, and which were just a means to an end for a period that we were going through. And that's what we're doing at the moment. I'm sure every business is doing the same. Good. So changing tact a little bit, guys, and moving on. So some of the members and the panel will have read, I'm sure, sort of in the press, global leaders of insurance institutes have set up a net zero insurance alliance. Many insurers and MGAs setting quite ambitious carbon net zero targets. I guess the question to you guys, how do we achieve that? And probably more importantly, what challenges does that present to us, particularly as claims handlers? Richard, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, it's been really interesting recently. So a number of insurers have kind of announced their aspirations around achieving net zero and much sooner than 2050. And clearly, as part of their supply chain, we need to be aligned to that. I think there's huge opportunities with customers. So if you think about green energy, the market for green energy, which always surprises me, that I will actively encourage people to pay more for electricity, but that finds a market. And I think it will be the same with these changes with insurers, that insurers are looking to align themselves with that environmental concern, that genuinely people want to change and alter how we approach climate change. And so it's really important that we align ourselves with that. And I think it's a huge opportunity for us as an industry to change and show that we're following. It's a huge challenge because, as Sarah says, I think to achieve this, you really do have to innovate. You have to look differently at how we approach subsidence. So how do we keep trees in place? How do we repair buildings so that we're not embedding huge amounts of carbon in those repairs? So I think it's a huge challenge, and I think we've only got a very short space of time to actually get there. So I mean, I think it's a great opportunity, but I think it's also a huge challenge in terms of our industry and how we respond. And I think it's also that wider piece around, it's not just the insurance world, it's the whole of the country, it's the whole of the world that needs to embrace this and think about how they change and how they adapt behaviours. And as I said at the beginning, I think this is a really interesting time for subsidence and how we deal with subsidence. And we're just one aspect of the whole insurance peril, but it's interesting because we touch on so many sides of that in terms of chopping down trees and doing fairly carbon heavy repairs to buildings. So it'll be interesting to see how we square that circle.
Yeah, and I think, Craig, I'll come to you on this, but what we're likely to see and where this creates a real challenge is that on the one hand, there is an ambitious target around emissions. On the other hand, what insurers will not want to see, and something that's signed up for our clients, is a dramatic increase in claims cost because we are working around the requirements of carbon neutral as well. And so that creates a very interesting paradox for an operations team and where we need to go with that, because insurers, and I'm sure our MJ members on here, are not going to see those two as binary, and they're going to want a blend of the two priorities that they've got there around cost control and their own emissions target too.
Yeah, I think for me, just stepping back slightly, the plans are ambitious and rightly so. They should be, not just across our industry, but globally as we're looking at. But we could almost be seen as the baddies in this situation, because we take trees out, and as Richard articulated, not too carbon friendly in some of the work that we have to do across the subsidence industry. So I think we need to call on full sort of collaboration across the industry and really understand the effect that we have, and not just from a negative point of view, but positively what we can do going forward. People talking about offsetting, but something really like paying your tax. Really, if you want to be truly green, there are going to be costs against it. It's a total change in the way in which we work. And talking to Richard and before my days in Innovation Group, I think we planted like 2 million trees. Is that something that we look for in the future? But it's a bit of a cop out just to look at that. I spoke to one of my ex-colleagues who got a consultant in because he was rightly worried about these plans and what are we going to do for his smaller business. And the guy was trying to charge him a fortune to talk about, energy saving light bulbs, and you need to have electric cars in your fleet and stuff like this. And I think we need to have a foot on the ball. Right. And I think just a bit of collaboration and understanding what's going to be the best benefit to drive towards these ambitious plans, understand individually what our part is played in that, and really push forward for it. But yeah, I think should be loads of successes out of it, but very challenging situation, especially when, we want to deliver this, but, there's a resistance to the cost part as well.
I think, Craig, as well, a greater challenge is probably easier for us than it is for some others out there, is that you need an alignment of your complete supply chain further down in whatever you're doing and buying into. Luckily for us, most of our supply chain is internal, so we're not outsourcing a lot, but it's easy for an insurer to make a promise, but there is an incumbent nature upon not only their tier 1 suppliers, but tier 2, tier 3, and that can feather a long way down to be buying into that ethos as well.
Yeah, I think through our vertically integrated supply chain, we are quite lucky coming into this because we've got more control over that internal supply network. But, we can make recommendations and collaborate, as I said, with our external suppliers. But there's only so much control or weight you've kind of got there because people are running their own businesses. And that's why I'm calling out for collaboration, really, and understanding what is going to be the biggest bang for our buck.
Yeah. Thank you. Sarah, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts on this. I could probably talk for an hour on it. So I attended the first ABI Climate Change Summit, which was last week, and the ABI launched their climate change roadmap last week. So there's a lot going on in this space at the moment, and the insurance market and long-term investment market are really, due to the amount of money involved in the market, there's a lot of focus on us to show the way and to guide that change. So we're talking about ambitious targets and whatnot. They're essential targets. I agree with what Craig said. We have to get on board with them, and it is going to involve a change in the way in which we conduct our lives and conduct business personally and, in the workplace. And we're all going to have to adapt and live through that because it's just absolutely essential. And subsidence is that contradiction, which is the sentence that I say quite a bit, which is that, tree root subsidence is made worse by climate change, and the solution is to remove trees, which in turn makes climate change worse. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that sort of circularity of it needs to be broken, and it will be via innovations that Richard and Craig have talked about, carbon light solutions in terms of repairing properties but keeping trees in situ. But it's far more than just that sort of carbon maths equation, what makes more sense in terms of carbon, keep the tree or underpinning. There's biodiversity, which we really need to focus on as well. We've got the Environment Bill coming out in the autumn, and biodiversity is one of the 3 main things in there, as well as carbon. So trees are far more than just carbon. They're habitats, and they're the things that we enjoy. They offer us shade. They're high amenity value. They help our mental health. So it's a really interesting but multifaceted area. There's no easy answers here. I can't claim to have any answers at all, really, but just to raise those few things.
And Sarah, just going to follow on from that a little bit in a slight tangent. So the environmental impact and the requirements that we've got now as an industry, how is the FOS requirement for a lasting and effective repair? How does that impact that? Because it creates, an unnecessary environmental burden as well, which again needs to be balanced up with some of the promises that insurers and MGAs are making about their carbon footprint.
That's a really tricky question. I don't know. And as part, I was talking earlier about doing a bit of a trawl through the FOS's decisions on defective design. I did something similar and trawled through their decisions yesterday on net zero and searching for climate change, and I came up with nothing. So I'm not seeing what the FOS are saying on this. Yeah. Do you know any more about it, Richard? Did they make any decisions?
Yeah, exactly the same as you. And there is nothing from the FOS about net zero. And I find that slightly worrying, because the FOS essentially sets best practice for us. So through the decisions, you get best practice. So when we think about defective design, you look at the FOS to see how you should be dealing with that. And if you look at the FOS and there's nothing about net zero, you kind of think, do they know this is coming? Do they have any idea this is coming? Do they have any idea of the impact this will have on how we handle claims? Because ultimately it will. I was looking at some stuff because Subsidence is 50 years old. So it was introduced as a peril in 1971. And I was reading some stuff from about that time. And I was just going to quote something. So there was a paper done in late 70s which said, prior to 75, 76, which was when we had the surge and suddenly everybody became aware of subsidence, minor cracking of walls was accepted by average householders as normal behaviour, and periodic making good was carried out during times of redecoration. So you kind of think, before we had subsidence cover, before I could claim from insurers, I would just live with this stuff, you know, the minor aesthetic stuff that we deal with. I would just live with it. But we can't anymore. And I just wonder if we don't need to start thinking more widely about how we approach subsidence. So is the stuff that we can do about trees, is the stuff we can do about soils, is the stuff we can do about repairs, but is there also stuff we can do about how customers react to subsidence, how lenders react to subsidence, so that we aren't kind of moribund by this. I've got a really minor crack and I need to spend thousands of pounds making sure that it goes away forever, because it just isn't a sustainable way of working in my simple mind. But it is a huge change, and I just worry that the FOS hasn't quite what's that phrase that we used to use in the 1990s, got on the bus, let alone recognise that it's one of the stops that they need to incorporate.
Richard, on that, I mean, just in terms of the production of new homes, especially, is resilience the answer, or again, does that create too much redundancy and waste as well?
I think that's one for Sarah, but why we build on floodplains, I do scratch my head. And when you think about buildings, why you're kind of over-engineering foundations so that they don't move ever, why you wouldn't look at them more holistically to say, okay, how do I design something that is more appropriate to those ground conditions, that maybe allows some flex and some movement? I think we do have to look at that whole picture of how we approach this, because it is such a fundamental shift in how we approach all of our aspects of lives. As Sarah was saying, it isn't as simple as saying an insurer wants to do this. It can't work if it's just an insurer. It has to be the whole of the insurance industry, but it has to be us as well joining in with that and thinking about how do we want to spend carbon, as it were. How do we want to invest that in our buildings, in our infrastructure? And I think that whole debate needs to get underway. And it can't just be an insurer or MGAs in isolation trying to do this on their own bat. It doesn't work in that way, which is why I think Sarah's kind of work with the ABI and stuff is really important, and will really help to kind of set the agenda for that discussion.
Yeah, Sarah, anything to add on that before I go to some of the questions we've got here?
Oh, there's lots. So I was just going to add a point about, we're talking about new homes and new homes being built with, resilience to ensure that they don't move, but then the focus on being to repurpose buildings we already do have and actually not, spending more carbon constructing as constructing new properties. And then also the focus on planting trees. You know, people are talking about carbon credits, there'll be biodiversity credits as well when the Environment Act comes in the autumn. And people seem to think they can plant their trees out of the problem, you know, plant their way out of the problem, if you like. But, you know, that's a whole host of, you know, what trees do you plant? Do you plant the appropriate tree in the right place? Do you look after them to make sure that they succeed? Where are they planted? It's every which way you look, every which way you take the conversation, there's loads of interesting points to raise. So yeah, again, I've got no answers, just more questions really.
Questions. Okay. Richard, we've got a question here directed at you from someone that clearly knows our business very well. What are Innovation Group's research and development team currently working on? Anything interesting in the way that subsidence claims are managed?
Yeah, we're looking at a range of things. So we have been working to develop and we patented an intervention technique, and that's really aimed at trying to reduce the water uptake from trees. We're looking at some stuff now about how you change soil properties. So how do you make soils less prone to shrink and swell? How do you reduce the amplitude of the movement that you get? And that's really interesting. And it's to do with running electrical currents through the ground and all that kind of whizzy pointy-headed stuff that I love, but I'm sure most people can't be bothered with. But how you do that is really quite difficult, and it's quite challenging. It isn't easy to do that kind of stuff. So I think where I think it will probably go is looking at how you repair buildings as well, and then it will be a combination of all of those that you will need to bring to the party in the future. So it isn't just looking at one solution will magically fix this. It will be various small incremental changes in all those different aspects of what causes subsidence and how you remedy subsidence that ultimately will deliver that change in terms of how you can approach this to live with trees, but also to reduce the impact in terms of carbon and environmental footprint when you come to do repairs.
Some interesting stuff there, Richard. So just for clarity, that's using electrokinesis to change the DNA of soils effectively.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, effectively you change the plasticity index. So you change how much it will shrink and swell, so that rather than having something that goes up and down dramatically, you reduce that. So I mean, it is very attractive in terms of technology. It's just quite difficult to do in practice. So yeah, it's definitely an area that we will develop and spend much more time looking at that.
Excellent. And Sarah, I've got one question here from you. So what's your key concern in subsidence for the next 5 years?
It's the climate change piece and just change in general. There's an awful lot, you know, I've got a screen up here with all the sort of chronology of all the changes that are coming up. But I mean, just as individuals, we're all going to feel an awful lot of change. Just as homeowners, you know, the government are committed to making 600,000 homes fueled by green energy by 2028. I mean, 2028 feels like it's in about 5 minutes time. You know, all new properties need to be built net zero by 2030. I mean, these changes are coming, so we're all going to experience them, and that's going to have a massive knock-on effect on how properties are repaired. That's going to, at the moment in the short term, that's going to cost more until they become sort of embedded technologies which will drive the price back down. So I suppose what am I expecting over the next 5 years? An awful lot of change. And I'm watching this space. I'm not quite sure where that's going to take us, but it's going to take us somewhere totally different. So if I can use the exciting words again, Craig, I will. I'm not sure whether I need to temper it and say it's not exciting, but it certainly will be.
It sounds like we're on the precipice of probably the most revolutionary era in subsidence since the 70s as a minimum, which is you know, exciting, daunting and interesting for MGAs and for people like us as well. So yeah, I think it's there's a lot of questions still that need to be answered, and perhaps we'll have a session on this in a year's time and have many more answers or much more understanding of the way that climate change is affecting our industry and how construction is affecting the way that houses are built as well. So it is a very, very, very interesting time. So Julia, I'll hand back to you. Thanks very much to Richard, to Craig, to Sarah for your inputs today. Thanks to everyone. I hope that was worthwhile. You got something out of that. Julia, over to you.
Thanks, Gary. And again, yeah, I echo my thanks, Gary, to you, Richard, Craig, Sarah. It's very much appreciated. Certainly an interesting topic, certainly a lot of changes, and I think particularly the conflict between tree planting and the potential impact on subsidence is certainly an interesting one, a real, I would say, dilemma there. But thank you all again, and thank you to Innovation Group and of course Sarah from DACBeachcroft. Thanks to all our delegates for joining us this afternoon. It's very much appreciated. As Gary said, I hope you found it interesting. We will issue a SurveyMonkey feedback post-event, so please do submit your feedback, as this does enable us to ensure we're tailoring our events to meet your needs. So thanks once again, thanks to everybody, and I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.
Thanks, Julia. Cheers.